Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to answer that age old question. That question that no one seems to want to answer. That question that some people don't even want to ask. And that question is nothing more than, do reparations actually work? Because you see, every few years, Americans return to the same old argument. Hey, reparations for black people. Reparations for black Americans, especially. You see, we're told that this is about justice. We're told that it's about healing and it's about finally fixing the past. But here's the uncomfortable question that no one's actually asking or no one wants to sit to actually think about. You see, if reparations are the solution, then why haven't they ever worked anywhere that they've actually been tried? And the even harder question that no one seems to want to ask is, why is it that black Americans are the only group that are consistently and constantly being told that they need money before they can actually move forward? How about we ask that, and how about we answer that? So today, ladies and gentlemen, we are actually going to hopefully finally put an end to this conversation. And to do so, we're not going to be emotional, we're not going to be political. What we are going to be is honest. We're going to be very, very brutally honest about this, because the truth is, far more, the real answer to this question, the truthful answer to this question is actually far more uncomfortable than either side wants to actually admit. But to answer the question, we actually do need to actually talk about what reparations are actually supposed to be. Because let's be clear about one. I'm starting to sound like a Democrat, but hey, let's be clear about what reparations actually mean. The argument is simple. Black Americans, they say, Black Americans, I didn't say, no, not that they say, Black Americans were actually enslaved, and legally discriminated against and systematically blocked from wealth. Therefore, the state actually, people felt that the state should actually compensate descendants financially. On paper, it actually sounds reasonable, but here's where honesty actually matters. Reparations assume that money is the missing ingredient holding black Americans back. And that assumption, ladies and gentlemen, whether you like it or not, is rarely ever questioned. And here's the uncomfortable pattern of the whole thing, because, for a second, you know what? Just let us actually just zoom out for a second, because you see, every group that has risen in America, whether it's the Jews, whether it's the Asians, whether it's the Irish, whether it's the Italians, Nigerians, even West Indians, they have actually faced discrimination. They have faced massacres. I hate to say, but they have faced massacres. Some were actually locked out of institutions, and none were actually given reparations. Yet, they built strong families. They built dense communities. They built, parallel institutions, businesses, cultural discipline. So here's the first uncomfortable truth that you don't want to hear. No group, and I repeat, no group in history itself, has ever been rescued into power by compensation. Power comes from structure and not checks. So, so here's why money doesn't create power, in case you are asking. Because I'm sure most of you must have been like, what? Are you serious? Power doesn't come from money? Because money without structure, whether you like it or not, does these three things. It gets consumed and not multiplied. Number two, it creates dependency and not sovereignty. Number three, it shifts responsibility outward instead of inward. This, my friends, is not theory. This is something that has already been tried and tested and proven to be true. You see, trillions have actually flowed into black America since the 1960s through welfare, through subsidies, grants, and even social programs. But yet, you've seen, families break down, in Black America. Yes, you've seen family breakdown increased in Black America. You've seen community cohesion, declining in Black America. There has been a rise in crime, especially in the exact places where money have actually flowed in the fastest. We see today. And that's not because black Americans are inferior. Absolutely not. It's not because, it's actually because money cannot replace culture. Money cannot replace discipline, and it most definitely cannot replace accountability. And here's the real cost that no one seems to want to talk about. But yeah, I will talk about it. You see, here's the cost that no one seems to actually want to mention. You see, reparations quietly send a message. It says you are owed, you are waiting, your future is delayed until someone actually pays. Ladies and gentlemen, that message, whether you like it or not, is actually quite poisonous, because communities that internalize victimhood don't actually organize, they don't build, they don't delay gratification. What they do is just wait. They wait, and waiting. To be honest with you, if we're going to keep it at 100, waiting has actually destroyed more communities than racism ever did. Yes, I said it. And that's the part that gets you, called names like Uncle Tom and whatever they call people these days, that actually, whatever black people call these days, that actually say the truth. But here's the thing: if you notice, it's this whole reparations thing is something that's being brought about, you know, by politicians. So I get asking myself, I keep asking myself, why is it that politicians seem to love the whole reparations debate? And there's a reason there's a reason this debate never ends. You see, reparations are actually politically perfect. They keep anger alive. They, require no cultural reform whatsoever. They demand that no hard conversations about family, about values or behavior are being had, and most importantly, they keep Black Americans emotionally invested, but structurally dependent. You see, a solved problem doesn't vote, but an unresolved grievance, that goes to the polls, and that votes the way they wanted to vote. So what actually builds power? Because we've been talking about power, and I've been telling you that money doesn't build power. You see, if the goal is real power, and not just symbolic justice, because but that's what Black Americans have been getting of late, all the way from, I don't even start saying all the way from whose regime, but I think anyone with a brain will know where it actually started from, or when it actually started. But here's the blueprint to real power, and I warn you, the blueprint is actually boring, but hey, it is actually proven. Societies have and communities have actually used this blueprint, and it's worked well for them. You see, the blueprint is simple: intact families, local ownership, cultural standards, delayed gratification, internal accountability. But the funny thing about things I just listed? None of that actually trends on social media. In fact, none of that fits on a protest sign. But every successful group in America, in fact, in the world, every successful community in the world actually follows it, including Black immigrants who actually arrived with no reparations. And guess what? They actually outperformed native-born Black Americans within a generation. That comparison, ladies and gentlemen, should actually, no, really, if that comparison makes you uncomfortable, then guess what? It should. Because it is true. But here's the final punch to this whole thing. I know a lot of you are not going to like it, because here's where I'm just going to give you a straight answer if you haven't figured out what the answer is by now. Let's ask the question first and foremost. So, do Black Americans need reparations? The answer is simple. I'm going to try to answer this in as many languages as I possibly can. No, nein, no, niet. Absolute capital N, no. What they need is actually something way harder. They need honesty without pity. They need responsibility without hatred. They need empowerment without excuses. Because reparations promise healing, but what they actually offer is nothing more than delay. No community No, and I repeat, no successful community ever waited its way into the future. So the question isn't whether, America, or should I say, America owes Black Americans. The real question, ladies and gentlemen, the real question is whether America, the real question, in fact, is actually who benefits from keeping Black Americans waiting. And the sooner you guys figure that out, the better you know who the real enemy is. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.